Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're talking about Portugal, and what a story it is. We're going to unpack how a pretty small nation, right on the edge of Europe, managed to build the world's first global empire, then lose it all and somehow reinvent itself. It's an absolutely incredible journey of ambition, crushing failure, and ultimately, resilience. So, how do we even begin to answer that question? Well, funny enough, the story really starts with its name. Yeah, before it was a country, it was just a port. And that name kind of hinted at everything that was to come. Portu's Calais, the port of Calais. It's all right there in those two little words. You've got the forces that would define Portugal, its ancient roots planted in the land, and its destiny as a port, always looking out at that vast, open sea. This tension, this duality, it's really the key to understanding the whole story. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the ancient foundations, see how it was forged into a kingdom, then witness its absolutely explosive rise as a global empire. After that, we'll navigate through the centuries of crises, and finally, explore its 20th century reinvention and what its legacy looks like today. So before Portugal was, well, Portugal, this piece of land was a total crossroads. It was a prize fought over by some of the most powerful civilizations in the ancient world, and each one left its mark, a layer that would become part of the nation's DNA. And these weren't just simple takeovers. They were entire layers of civilization being laid down. The Romans came in and built the foundations, the roads, the laws, and the Latin language that would eventually become Portuguese. After Rome fell, Germanic tribes took over for a bit. But then, the really transformative wave came in 711 AD when the Moors arrived from North Africa. They brought advanced science, incredible architecture, and new farming techniques that would shape the peninsula for hundreds of years. Okay, so out of this incredible mix of cultures, a brand new identity started to fight for its life. And let's be clear. Creating the Kingdom of Portugal wasn't some quick event. It was a long, bloody, hard-fought struggle to carve out an independent nation. Yeah, the birth of Portugal was just this slow, determined grind. It started with the Reconquista, a push south that took centuries. At first, the territory was just a small county, basically a vassal to a bigger kingdom. But then this one nobleman, Afonso Henriques, comes along and decides he wants it all for himself. He literally had to fight his own mother for control. He won, and in 1139, he declared himself the first king of Portugal. It still took another 100 years to secure the southern coast, but by 1249, the country's borders were set. Borders that, amazingly, have barely changed since. All right, so with its homeland finally secure, and with Spain blocking any expansion in Europe, Portugal did something completely audacious. It turned its back on the continent and just faced the Atlantic, ready to find its fortune on the totally unknown seas. And the pace of what happened next is just breathtaking. It kicks off in 1415 with a small foothold in Africa. From there, with royal money and new tech like the caravel ship, Portuguese sailors just systematically pushed down the African coast, charting everything. The first huge breakthrough was in 1488 when Bartolomeu Diaz finally rounded the Cape of Good Hope. Just 10 years later, Vasco da Gama makes it all the way to India, tapping into the super lucrative spice trade. Then, in 1500, a fleet heading to India gets blown off course and accidentally lands in Brazil. I mean, think about that. In less than 100 years, this tiny nation built a global trading network that stretched from South America all the way to China. Let this sink in for a second. A country of maybe 2 million people was running a massive maritime empire, a thalassocracy. It wasn't based on huge armies conquering land, but on the power of its ships to control the sea lanes. They were the ones who connected the continents and basically created the first truly global economy. But this golden age, built on daring and sea power, was incredibly fragile. And right at the peak of its power, the whole thing was shattered by one single catastrophic event. The young King Sebastian, full of crusading fever, leads his army into this disastrous battle in North Africa. He's killed, along with pretty much the entire Portuguese nobility. And the most critical part, he had no heir. This created a massive power vacuum that would bring the entire empire to its knees. That one battle set off a domino effect of crises that Portugal would spend the next 300 years trying to overcome. The fall wasn't quick. It was just this long, slow series of devastating blows that took the empire apart, piece by piece. Okay, so first, with no king, the Spanish monarch steps in and claims the throne. For the next 60 years, Portugal is dragged into all of Spain's wars, which means its old allies, like England, become enemies who start picking off its colonies. Then, as if things weren't bad enough, nature deals a blow. In 1755, a massive earthquake and tsunami completely levels Lisbon, the heart of the empire. Barely recovered from that, they get invaded by Napoleon, forcing the entire royal court to flee to Brazil. And the final crippling blow? That comes in 1822, when Brazil, the absolute jewel of the empire, declares its own independence. And you'd think things couldn't get any worse, but the 20th century just brought more turmoil. The monarchy collapsed in 1910, and it was replaced by this deeply unstable republic. But out of all this chaos, the stage was finally set for the most profound reinvention in the nation's history. So after all that instability, a coup in 1926 eventually led to what was called the Estado Novo, or the New State. This was a right-wing, authoritarian dictatorship under Antonio de Oliveira Salazar that lasted for almost 50 years. We're talking censorship, a secret police, and these draining colonial wars in Africa as they desperately tried to hang on to the last pieces of the empire. This long, dark chapter finally ended in 1974 with a nearly bloodless military coup called the Carnation Revolution, which brought democracy, freedom, and just a complete 180 in national policy. And the impact of this change? It was immediate and it was profound. As Portugal embraced democracy and joined the rest of Europe, it modernized at an incredible speed. Just look at this one statistic: infant mortality. In 1970, it was shockingly high for a European country. Over 55 deaths for every 1,000 births. By 2010, it had plummeted to 2.5, one of the lowest rates in the entire world. That one number tells a story of a revolution in healthcare, education, and just the overall quality of life. So after this epic journey, a meteoric rise, a long and painful fall, and then this dramatic rebirth, what's the takeaway? What really defines Portugal's legacy? Well, when you boil it all down, Portugal's story is really about profound resilience. It's an identity that was forged in centuries of fighting for its own independence. It's a legacy built on a spirit of discovery that literally connected the globe for the first time, spreading its language and culture from Brazil to Macau. And today, it's the story of a nation that completely reinvented itself, finding a new, confident identity as a modern European democracy. Which brings us to a final, really fascinating question. For a nation whose modern identity was so wrapped up in its global empire for 500 years, what does it even mean to be Portuguese today? It's an incredible thing to think about, a past defined by the sea and a future now firmly anchored in Europe. We really hope this explainer gave you a better handle on Portugal's incredible history. If you enjoyed it, hitting that like button and subscribing would be amazing. It seriously helps us make more of these. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.